Back on the HQ, dubbed the South's oldest rivalry, the 128th meeting between UVA and UNC turned into the biggest upset on Saturday as the Cavaliers, 24-point underdogs to the 10th-ranked Tar Heels, pulled off perhaps the biggest upset in school history, taking out North Carolina in Chapel Hill, 31-27, your final score. And for more on what comes next for some of the top teams in college football, we welcome in CBS Sports college football playoff expert Jerry Palm and 24/7 Sports national college football writer Brad Crawford. Jerry, I'm going to start with you. North Carolina looked for all the world like a true contender for their first ACC title since LT was there in 1980. Maybe more than that. What happened to UNC, and what does it mean for the Tar Heels going forward?
Yeah, it means, they might not even make a New Year's Six Bowl now. I mean, this is a loss that's going to be difficult to overcome. They don't get to play Florida State or Louisville in the regular season. So now, the quality wins, they're really going to be hard to come by for them to try and build up a resume that might get them into an Orange Bowl spot. It's a real disaster of a loss for North Carolina, and it's going to be really difficult for them to overcome this.
This is Mack Brown's fifth loss as a double-digit favorite outright since 2020. And if this was Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day or Nick Saban we're talking about, his head would be on a platter Sunday morning. That's how bad this loss is for the Tar Heels. Not only does it knock UNC from a borderline top 10 spot to probably somewhere in the high teens to low 20s, but this also ends Drake May's Heisman chances here as a junior. So really bad primetime loss for UNC as a 3.5 touchdown favorite at home. And look, fellas, this was a UNC team that was knocking on the playoff door with the first rankings coming out next week.
And by the way, UVA needed some good news. Congrats to the Wahoos on their first ever win over a top 10 team on the road in school history. Brad, I'll stick with you. It wasn't always pretty, but a familiar result in Columbus. Penn State comes up short again against the top opponent. The Buckeyes remain undefeated. What or who impressed you most in this one?
Yeah, this loss for Penn State really puts the Nittany Lions' backs against the wall now, with just really the Michigan game being the only spotlight opportunity left. Drew Allard did not play well against an elite Ohio State defense, playing without Denzel Burke at corner. So I was very impressed with Jim Knowles' game plan in this game. Penn State came in as one of the most efficient teams in college football, and Ohio State stymied everything the Nittany Lions tried to do offensively. Then you got to, tip your cap to Kyle McCord. His one touchdown pass came in crunch time to clinch it to Marvin Harrison Jr. So once again, Ohio State passes another test at home against a very quality opponent.
Yeah, Penn State is really up against it now if they're going to try and make the college football playoff, because that path goes through Michigan. And even though they're going to get Michigan at home, that is an unenviable task. And then they probably need Ohio State to beat Michigan as well, so that they can, be there with the one-loss team, the only other team in the Big Ten with one loss or fewer. And so it's a difficult task now for Penn State. They can still make a New Year's Six Bowl, but you have to give, like you said, Kyle McCord a lot of credit, but also Drew Aller, the Penn State quarterback. These are two first-year guys in that position, and the experience of McCord getting to play a game at Notre Dame, a big-time game where he came through at the end, I think that experience really helped him in this situation. And for Aller, this is the first real competent team they've played other than maybe Iowa at home. And I think his lack of experience in this situation also showed.
Jerry, let's stick with you. Alabama looked to be in huge trouble. They were down 13, could have been more to Tennessee at the half in Tuscaloosa, but the tide turned in the second half. Bama ran away with this thing by 2 touchdowns in the end. Where does Alabama fit in the greater college football hierarchy now, heading into their bye week?
Yeah, well, they're still sitting there on one loss, and if they're a 12-1 SEC champion, you have to like their chances of making the college football playoff, even though the SEC is having something of a down year. But Alabama, that's their margin for error is 0. If they're thinking about a national championship, they cannot afford to lose again between now and championship Saturday. If they can't lose then either. So this is a big comeback win for Alabama. They really needed it, and they're going to need to keep going because, like I said, no margin for error for Alabama.
Somehow Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide just keep getting it done in the second halves of these huge SEC ball games. I'm really impressed with, Jalen Milroe's ability to shake off that 2-turnover first half and outshine Joe Milton after intermission. You have to look at Bama's defense here. It's been elite in the second half of games. beat a nationally ranked Ole Miss team a few weeks ago, beat Tennessee today, came back from double digits down too. So it looks like once again the SEC West is going to go through Tuscaloosa in a few weeks against LSU. And I know Bama's going to want revenge after that overtime loss in Baton Rouge last year.
All right, Brad, last game we're going to talk about here, but what a game it was. I mean, it looked for all the world like Utah was going to beat USC for a third straight time. They beat them twice last year. Then Caleb Williams plays what we think is the hero's role, runs in for a touchdown, but no. Utah still has USC's number. They go right down the field, kick a game-winning field goal as time expires, and now USC's got 2 losses. The Utes, once again, beat the Trojans, this time in L.A. Brad, let's talk about both of these teams, where they fall after this game. Let's start with the winners, Utah. Where are they right now?
Yeah, I think Utah is still in the mix there for a Pac-12 championship, has won back-to-back titles out west. Probably going to move up close to that 11-10 range in the polls. And you look at USC, man, Lincoln Riley, he's now 2-5 against top 25 teams with the Trojans. 3 of those losses have come to Kyle Whittingham and Utah. To me, this makes me question what this USC team is going to look like moving forward this season now that Caleb Williams and the Trojans are out of the playoff race and a game back of the leaders in the Pac-12. So I'd be looking for Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley to try to get this game back together this week. But, man, it's tough now with a blowout loss on the road to Notre Dame and just a heartbreaker at home against a team that they just cannot flat-out beat.
Yeah, Utah really seems to have their number. That is actually their 4th consecutive win in this series. And it's, they're a good defensive team. And they played good defense again today. They got enough good play from their quarterback. Utah and USC are both still in contention for the Pac-12 title because while that is USC's 2nd loss and it really eliminates them in any hope of a national championship, they could still win the conference title because that's their 1st conference loss. And this conference may beat each other up to the point where somebody with 2 losses ends up winning it. But it's a very difficult blow for USC because this is not what they set out to do this year. And while their offense is spectacular and really just jaw-dropping, the problem is they don't play good enough defense. And if you don't play good enough defense, you don't win championships.
All right, Jerry, let's spin it back towards the positive. After what we just witnessed in college football on this Saturday, who do you think is going to be the biggest riser in the standings after these games?
It's going to be Utah. I mean, that's a huge win on the road. They were a 7-point underdog. And while they were in the middle of the top 25, I think Utah can crack the top 10 this week on the strength of this win. And you got to give them a lot of credit. They're doing it without Cam Rising. This is the guy that they were counting on to lead their team. He hasn't been able to play yet this year. He may not be able to play yet this year. And yet they're showing that they can still play at a high level and win big-time games like this even without it.
Yeah, keep an eye on where Ohio State is in Sunday's Week 9 AP poll. Might move from 3 to number 2. Only had 1 first-place vote last week. I think that changes after beating Penn State. They've now beaten Notre Dame on the road by a yard, a decent Maryland team by double digits, and now a previously unbeaten Nittany Lion squad. Meanwhile, Michigan, the team ahead of Ohio State, does not have a win over a ranked team yet. I know the Wolverines look good, and they're doing it every Saturday. But the selection committee in 2 weeks here is going to take a hard, long look at the Buckeyes at a possible number 1 or number 2 team when that first poll is released based on the resume we've seen thus far.
All right, let's flip it around. We got to talk some bad stuff. Whose loss is going to hurt them the most after this week, Brad?
I think for me it's Tennessee. This might be the tipping point, in my opinion, for the Vol season. We've talked so much about the home game with Georgia here in a few weeks in November, but Tennessee still had to play Bama, lost today, Kentucky, and a nationally ranked, now 7-1 Missouri team. So this could be a 4-loss Tennessee team here for Josh Heupel, and Tennessee's going to stay in the top 25, but it's going to be very close. So I'm expecting a 7 or 8 spot drop from that current number 17 spot.
Yeah, for me, it's North Carolina. I mean, you lose at home to Virginia, had 1 win all year going into this game. You're undefeated. You had a chance to maybe make a run at the college football playoff. Now, the ability of North Carolina to even make a New Year's Six bowl is in some level of doubt. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Louisville. So the big games on their schedule are just about gone. And North Carolina is going to have a difficult time now making an impression on the selection committee. But a loss like this, that's going to knock them way down in the rankings going into this week, and they're going to have a hard time trying to build that back up.
All right, just one last thing to do for both of you guys. We're going to get your top 10s before they come out on Sunday. And, Jerry, you've got honors.
All right, well, I'm going to keep the top 5 the same. Number 6, Oklahoma, also the same. Number 7, I'm going to go with Oregon jumping Texas after a lackluster performance by the Longhorns this week. And then, Penn State will drop out, Carolina will drop out, and at number 9, I have Alabama, and number 10, Utah, moving up from 14 this week on the strength of that win at USC.
Yeah, for me, my big riser is Ohio State at number 2. I've got Michigan 3, FSU coming back to beat Duke at 4, Washington 5. You got Oklahoma at 6, and then Texas, one-loss Texas, still in that playoff mix. Oregon at 8, Penn State at 9, despite that loss to Ohio State. And then here comes Alabama once again back in the top 10 here heading into the last weekend in October. So that's my top 10 for heading into week 9. My big riser is Ohio State at number 2.
All right, that's great stuff after another great college football Saturday. Jerry Palm is our college football playoff expert. Brad Crawford, national college football writer for 24/7 Sports. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the insight. Also, be sure to check out the Cover 3 podcast where co-hosts Chip Patterson and Danny Cannell, plus Tom Fornelli and Bud Elliott break down all the biggest storylines and the games in college football. Download the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts.